We're jumping right into the deep end with our number 10, the Mothman. Let's go back to November 12th, 1966. 5 men were digging a grave at a cemetery in Clenadin when they claimed they saw a man-like figure fly out of the trees and over their heads. 3 days later, 2 young couples from Point Pleasant told police they saw a large creature with red glowing eyes in their car headlights. They described it as a large flying man with 10-foot wings. It was following them near an old World War II munitions plant. The legend of the Mothman was born. In the days after, more people reported seeing him. 2 firemen described it as a large bird with red eyes. About 90 miles away, a man from Salem said he saw a creature in the back of his barn with 2 red circle eyes like bicycle reflectors. For the next year, everyone was on edge, expecting to see the Mothman swooping down on them at any moment. Then, on December 15, 1967, the Silver Bridge collapsed in Point Pleasant, resulting in the deaths of 46 people. Now, engineers blamed a defect in the suspension chain. Others said the Mothman sightings had something to do with it. As the years went by, experts tried to explain away all the different sightings, saying it was hallucinations or sleep paralysis. The Mothman story went cold for about 50 years. Then, in November 2016, WCHS-TV published a photo from an anonymous man that people claimed was the Mothman. See for yourself what you make of this famous urban legend picture. If you're excited to play the next Fallout game, it might not be that long till you meet the Mothman for yourself. Next up at number 9 now, we have the Snarly Yow. Some call this the Vanishing Dog, the Black Dog, or even the Dog Fiend. Whatever people in West Virginia call it though, this phantom dog has been seen by a lot of people. It's described as large, black, and teeth-bearing, appearing in front of people's cars on the dark mountain roads, but when they hit it and get out to check, the dog has disappeared into thin air. It was first sighted in the early 1800s, where it would chase people on horseback, in carriages, or donkey carts. It has continued this habit into modern times, only now it can be seen keeping pace with cars going at 55 miles per hour. If be told, locals don't really know how fast this thing can actually go. Although many people have reported seeing the creature, it has never actually harmed anyone as of yet. This kind of unnerves some people though, who worry, what does it really want from the people it terrorizes? Moving on to number 8 now, we have the Sheep Squatch. This one is also known as the White Creature, a monster said to roam the Kanawha Valley. It's been described as a bear with the shape of a dog, if you can imagine that. It has huge saber-like fangs. Its wool is a dirty white color, hence the sheep part of its name. Despite its lumbering appearance, the creature is fast, moving at lightning speed. Perhaps what's most creepy is its tendency to switch from 4 legs to 2 when it moves, making it seem very human-like. Its screams in the night have been compared to the sound of someone being murdered. Then there are the attacks. Here's where things get really weird. People always say that the creature jumps on them like a wolf, sinking its teeth right into their flesh, making them howl out in pain, but then when the attack is over, they look down to find there is not a single mark on their body. That's better news than an actual mortal wound, I guess, but most people who have seen the Sheep Squatch hope to never again. Next up at number 7 now, we have the Flatwoods Monster. Some also call this the Green Monster or the Phantom of Flatwoods. The legend of it began in 1952 after a group of children claimed they saw a UFO crash behind a hill not far from the town. They went out and told Kathleen May, a local hairdresser, who came with them to inspect the crash site. From the top of the hill, they saw a pulsing red light. Then their flashlights landed on what they described as a man-like figure with a round red face surrounded by a pointed hood-like shape. They said he was 10 foot tall. His eyes emitted greenish orange light. His body was dark green in color. Kathleen May said it had small claw-like hands and a head that resembled the ace of spades. According to the group, it made a hissing sound as it approached them. One of the kids dropped the flashlight in fear and they all fled the scene. Some have said the sighting was nothing more than a common barn owl, but many in the town believe it to be true. Even the welcome sign says Flatwoods is the home of the Green Monster. Next up at number 6 now, we have the Grafton Monster. As the name might suggest, this comes from the old railroad town of Grafton. There may not be room for a mysterious creature among the many buildings and houses there, but the place is surrounded by dense woodland, and that's where locals say the Grafton Monster lurks. Ever since the 1960s, people have reported seeing a man-like creature resembling Bigfoot or the skunk ape. They say it stands between 7 and 9 feet tall and is cloaked in pale skin that is slick to the touch, kind of like a seal or dolphins. Local farmers report it the most, saying it tears down down their fences and strips their trees of fruit. Those who have got close enough described it as being able to run extremely fast and having a foul odor. Perhaps the strangest description, although rarer than the rest, is that the Grafton monster is headless. Others say witnesses are mistaken and it only appears headless because it tucks its head low to its chest. Some say you'll know it's near when it lets out a low whistle through the trees. Next up now at number 5 we have the Bunny Man. This one sounds cute, right? You guys might have thought we were taking a quick break from scary halfway through the video. Or no, it's just getting worse. The Bunny Man legend began with 2 incidents in Fairfax County in 1970. The first came from Air Force Cadet Robert Bennett and his fiancée. On October 9th, the couple were returning from a football game around midnight. They parked up to visit a relative when out of nowhere a figure ran up to the back of their car and smashed the front passenger window in. They looked up to see a man in a white suit with long bunny ears. The Bunny Man screamed that they were on private property and trespassing. The couple sped away and later found a hatchet that was used to smash the window on the floor of their car. 10 days later, a construction man called Paul Phillips was on the same road. He approached a man standing on the porch of an unfinished home. He described him as wearing a grey, black and white bunny costume. The Bunny Man began chopping at a porch post with a long-handled axe, saying, "All you people trespass around here. If you don't get out of here, I'm going to bust you on the head." The police investigation was closed due to the lack of evidence, but more than 50 other people came forward claiming to have seen the Bunny Man, many of them on that same stretch of road. Even to this day, locals have reported seeing freshly skinned rabbit carcasses hanging from the overpass of what is now known as Bunny Man Bridge, a sure sign that this axe-wielding fiend is nearby, waiting to bust you on the head. Next up at number 4 now, we have Mamie Thurman. On June 22nd, 1931, the body of a young woman was found slain near the town of Rogan. Her neck was broken, her throat cut from ear to ear, and she had been shot twice in the head at close range. The motive or culprit was a complete mystery. The whole town was shocked. A local handyman was convicted of the crime, but there was still a lot of questions. Her death certificate states that she was buried in Logan Memorial Park, but her funeral home records said her body was transported to Kentucky. However, the cemetery in Kentucky has no record of her interment. One night after her funeral, it was also said that a local businessman paid $1,000 to move her body to a different location altogether. To this day, it remains a mystery where exactly she was buried. According to local folklore, many claim that her ghost now wanders the hills, searching for the person who took her life, as the handyman was not to blame. Others said she waits on that same road, waiting for justice. Many have seen her there, saying she hitchhikes with truck drivers only to vanish into thin air. People who park on the hill say they felt her push the car up. Nice, but no thanks. Next up at number 3 now, we have Screaming Jenny. The story goes like this. Along some railroads in West Virginia, there were some abandoned old storage sheds. The poor had moved in there to escape the harsh winters. A sweet woman called Jenny lived there. She had fallen on hard times, never had enough to eat, and the small fires barely kept her alive. Still, she did everything she could to help those around her. On one cold autumn evening, she sat shivering over her fire when a spark flew out and lit her wool skirt on fire. She was so busy eating her broth that she didn't notice until the fire began to scorch right down to her skin. She leapt up and threw the broth all over herself, but that didn't stop the fire. She began screaming along the tracks, begging for help as the flames engulfed her whole body. She ran for the nearby train station, hoping someone there could help, but by now she was a glowing inferno, a ball of fire that looked barely human. In her pain and confusion, she didn't see the train rounding the curve ahead of her. Her screams stopped as the train mowed her down. The station crew found her dead, still burning. They put her out, gave her a funeral, and buried Jenny in the local graveyard. She was quickly forgotten. Then, a month later, another train was rounding the curve on the tracks when it hit another screaming ball of fire. The crew expected to see another mangled body burning, but this time there was nothing there. It's been that way ever since. Train drivers in the area say they still see Screaming Jenny, especially on the anniversary of her death. It seems she's locked in an eternal loop, still desperate for the help she needed in her final moments. Next up at number 2 now, we have the Ogua. Quite simply, the Ogua is a river monster. It's said to lurk in the waters of the Monongahela River in Marion County. Its legend goes back to Native American tribes who lived along the riverbanks there many years ago. It's said to be a serpentine creature of up to 500 pounds in weight, with a reddish brown colour and deadly razor sharp teeth. It's also amphibious and has been known to clamber onto land if it needs to. It stays hidden in the waters during the day, coming onto land at night to hunt for prey. Apparently, it even hunts deer. Yeah, fully grown deer. It waits along their paths and then thrashes them into submission with its tail before dragging them into the river to devour. Of course, if it can bring down a deer, it wouldn't have much trouble with a human. Some people don't even go near the places where it's sighted, at least not alone. And finally, number 1 now, we have Droop Mountain. On this mountain, there was once a very fierce battle during the American Civil War. Many lost their lives, and the blood spilled that day is said to have soaked into the very mountain itself, changing it forever. They say the cries of war still linger on Droop Mountain, forever lost in time. Visitors have reported that something just feels off when you're up there. At night, there is no mistaking it at all. One woman who was raised beside the mountain reported seeing a man standing up on the old battlefield. His body glowed in the darkness, and to her astonishment, he had no head. Whenever they shone a light on him, he disappeared. Another time, the woman was walking with her husband and cousins when the whole group stopped in their tracks. Up there again on the old battlefield was a transparent soldier on his horse. The soldier seemed to notice them before turning away and vanishing into the trees. Even skeptics have reported seeing the figure of a headless man drifting along. Those who have got close say he is wearing a Confederate uniform. Now others say his head isn't actually missing, it's just been shot off. To be honest, I'm not really sure which one of those is scary. But either way, I don't think I'd head up Droop Mountain at night by myself. Starting off at number 10 now, we have the Lake Shawnee Amusement Park. It's been a long time since laughter was heard in this amusement park. It was abandoned in 1966 after the grisly death of 2 young kids there. For some people, that was reason enough to never visit the place again, but others say its dark past goes back a lot further than people think. They say the very land is cursed. It apparently goes back to 1783 when a turf war started between a European family of settlers and Native Americans who owned that land. They killed 3 of the family's children during the fight. The father, Mitchell Clay, enlisted the help of other settlers to seek vengeance for his family. After burying his children, they murdered 7 Native Americans in revenge. Ever since then, locals say the very land itself has been cursed, soaked in the blood of all this hateful war that took place there many years ago. When the amusement park was built there, deaths were attributed to this curse. A little girl was killed when her swing smashed into a truck. A small boy drowned in a swimming pool. Over the years, the park's rides were responsible for 6 deaths. The park closed, but in the years since then, it has become a bit of a hotspot for paranormal investigators. You can even go on a tour of the most haunted places. Some have reported seeing ghosts of the dead all over the park. Let me know if you ever go and you see anything really strange. Next up at number 9 now, we have Haunted Harper's Ferry. Harper's Ferry is a very picturesque town in West Virginia, full of dozens of 19th century buildings and old shops, restaurants and inns. All of those old buildings though are said to be the reason why this town always makes the list of the most haunted places in America. It was the site of many Civil War battles, and locals say their restless spirits still walk the streets and pass through the old stone walls. Alyssa Lavasseur, manager of the town's museum, once said, "The whole town is haunted. People have seen things. You can probably ask anyone in town who has been living here or works here, and they have seen something. They can't deny it." It may seem like a bold claim, but it seems that it's true. The townspeople are all in agreement that their homes are also home to ghosts. Regular sightings include wounded soldiers, an old priest, and a phantom army troop performing one of their marching drills. Sounds annoying, and you probably can't ask them to keep it down. Next up at number 8 now, we have the Unknown Stranger. Today, in the town of Middleway, you can visit a grave where the marked name on it is simply the Unknown Stranger. The story goes way back to 1794. A traveling stranger was staying at a boarding house in Middleway when he fell gravely ill. He called the owner of the board house, Adam Livingston, to his bedside and told him he was Catholic. He begged to be given his last rites by a Catholic priest. Livingston was a Lutheran and knew of no Catholic priest nearby. The stranger begged and begged, but his request would be his last dying breath. In the years since then, locals say the Unknown Stranger haunts the old boarding house and even the town at large. They say he is a vengeful spirit, unable to pass on because he didn't get the last rites he so desperately wanted. Today, you can go to the grave of the Unknown Stranger, but some still fear his wrath will return against them. Coming in at number 7 now, we have the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum. This building was a psychiatric hospital that became operational in 1864. For almost 100 years it took in some of the most troubled and disturbed minds in West Virginia. It was only built to house about 250 patients, but began to take on more than it could handle. By the 1950s, it had reached its peak and housed over 2,400 patients who were all jammed into these overcrowded and poor conditions. Despite this, the asylum limped on for another 40 years until it was finally closed to patients in 1994. Now, people say it's haunted by the thousands of tortured souls who eked out a miserable existence there in their lives. Those who have dared to visit it report doors slamming, shadowy figures and blood-curdling screams from within the building's crumbling walls. Many locals stay well clear of it, but brave visitors can take special ghost tours right through the asylum where they say things go bump in the night almost every night. Next up at number 6 now, we have the North Bend Rail Trail, Tunnel number 19. That's a mouthful. Tunnel number 19 is also known as the Silver Run Tunnel. In 1910, a train engineer got the shock of his life when he saw that there, stood in front of the tunnel they were about to go into, was a girl. She was described as having pitch black hair and bloodless skin. She was wearing a white dress and didn't seem to fear the train that was barreling towards her. At first he thought she must have been sleepwalking. He slammed the brakes on the train, but she didn't move. Then, just as the train was about to hit her, she screamed and jumped straight up into the air. When he asked the next station master about this, he told him not to worry, as several others had reported the exact same sight. A new engineer called O'Flannery didn't believe that this ghost was real. On his first run, he sped towards the tunnel. It was foggy and there was a full moon. He spotted the woman in white but kept on going. The ghost screamed and shot straight up. When he reached his first station, there was a crowd waiting. He asked what was going on and was told that as his train passed each station, people were trying to warn him that there was a girl riding the front of the train, her arms outstretched, and she was screaming. He found nothing on the front of his train and requested a transfer almost immediately. Some still report seeing her outside the tunnel even to this day. Next up at number 5 now, we have the Grey Flats Ghost. Locals in the town of Beckley will sometimes warn people before hiking the nearby Grey Flats Trail. It runs through ancient and eerie woods. Old farms pepper the outskirts, brambles and rotting oak trees mingle, and the canopy of leaves can snuff out any light trying to break through the darkness. Naturally, the trail has earned a reputation for hauntings. I found one story from a hiker that goes a little like this. It was nearly dusk in late October and it was cold and drizzly, and though that made seeing difficult, what we saw was plainly visible. At the point on the Grey Flats Trail where trees move in close, we saw a black figure in what might have been a long coat and a broad-rimmed hat. Though man-shaped, it had no obvious depth, as no light fell upon it. It was completely black, and rather than moving like a person, it moved without walking, and it moved to the side, away from us, up through the trees, away from the road toward what might have been the farmhouse. And though the rocky ground rose, the figure did not. It appeared to move into the earth. As soon as it disappeared into the ground, my friend Becky began to get sick. She held her hands over her stomach and bent down and began to let out a kind of long sob. We asked her if she was alright, and she shook her head yes, that she just wanted to go home, so we grabbed her by the arms and went back out towards Ship Rock. Just as we were getting ready to turn onto the old farm trail, we looked back and saw the shape again. It appeared to be emerging from the ground and heading down toward where the old strip mines were. Very creepy story. Their words, not mine. I'm definitely creeped out though. Moving on to number 4 now, we have Blennerhassett Hotel. This hotel in St. Parkersburg seemed normal from the outside, but everyone will tell you it's what goes on inside that's made it famous among ghost hunters. It was built by William Chancellor in the late 19th century. Over 100 years on from that, locals say it's haunted by the very man who built it. There are consistent reportings and documented happenings of hauntings there going back decades. Visitors say that several spirits actually haunt the old hotel, but William is probably the most well known. He appears as an old man in a 3-piece grey suit. They say his hair and beard are slicked back and that he sometimes wears a top hat and a cane. The spirit is said to look solid until he disappears in a puff of cigar smoke. Some of the other spirits include the children. These small child ghosts are said to play tag and hide and seek throughout the day and at night. Some of the staff report hearing whistlings as if someone was trying to get their attention, but they look up to find that nobody is there. The cooks in the kitchen say they feel tugging on their sleeves while they're trying to cook. I wonder if you can ever get used to a feeling like that. Next up at number 3 now, we have the Whipple Company Store. From 1890 to 1964, this building served as the company store for the local mine. Over the years though, it began to take on more responsibilities. At first, it became a meeting place for town events, then it hosted ballroom dances, and then it became an embalmer's. That's right, the town's dead were embalmed in the basement there, with bodies being stored until their funerals. With all of this energy, it's no surprise that many ghost hunters have been drawn to this building. There have been reports of people smelling coal dust or hearing strange whispering voices all over the building. There have even been a few apparitions of miners. It's a unique building because of how it's built. They say you can stand in the middle and hear everything that's happening in the whole building, even a whisper. So if you do visit, there's almost no way you're missing a ghostly apparition. Moving on to number 2 now, we have the West Virginia State Penitentiary. This prison opened in 1875 in the town of Moundsville. Ever since then, it's gained a reputation as perhaps the most haunted prison in the United States. That may have something to do with its rather violent history. In the late 1800s, the prison took over executions for the entire state. 85 men were hung and 9 electrocuted there. Suicide, murder, and other violent punishments also contributed to the death of hundreds of inmates. The exact number of inmates who died by violent means is unknown, perhaps intentionally hidden by the perpetrators. Locals will tell you the story of the phantom inmates who wander the hallways at night, especially the infamous Shadow Man. Ghost tours can show you around the lockup areas and the prison yard. You can even see the electric chair dubbed Old Sparky, responsible for the execution of a number of inmates. I was amazed to read that you can actually stay inside the penitentiary overnight. No lights, no nothing, just you and your friends trying to brave it through a night in one of America's most feared prisons. Sound fun? And finally, number 1 now, we have the Greenbrier Ghost. Elva Zona Heister was born in Greenbrier County sometime around 1873. Not much is really known about her early life, but her later life is very well documented. She married a wandering blacksmith by the name of Erasmus Stribling Trout Shoe. That was actually going to be my name at one point. Anyway, the two were married for only a year when Elvis mysteriously died. Despite the local custom of letting the town's women clean and dress the corpse for the funeral, Erasmus insisted he do it all himself. Very strange. Rumors began to spread that he had killed his wife, but nobody could prove it. Then, one night, the ghost of Elva was said to appear by her mother's bedside to explain how she'd been murdered by her husband. Her mother took that information to the local prosecutor, who then dug up the body and proved that Elva had indeed been killed by her husband. The event is now enshrined in local history, the ghost that helped solve its own murder.
Starting us off at number 10 is the Greenbrier Ghost. So I know ghost stories are quite a common appearance on top 10, but you're gonna wanna hear me out, I promise you. So Zona Heister Shoe was married to a man named Edward, and one day he told their servant to go run some errands, and when the boy returned he found Zona's dead body at the bottom of their stairs. By the time the doctor got there, Edward had carried Zona upstairs, dressed her in a pretty dress and collar, and laid her on the bed. Weird flex, but okay. Sloppily, the doctor didn't really examine her body because she was already dead, but he did see some bruising on her neck. But when he got too close, Edward just lost it and told him to get out. At her funeral, he wouldn't let anyone close to her coffin, and again he hid her neck by tying her favorite scarf around it. Zona's mother, Mary Jane, knew something was wrong, and she had a strong feeling foul play was involved. She started praying that Zona would come back to her and tell her what happened, and 4 weeks later she did. Back as a ghost, Zona told her how Edward was extremely abusive. That night he thought she hadn't cooked any meat for dinner, so he snapped her neck. Ghost Zona literally turned her head a full 360 degrees exorcist style just to show her mum. Mary Jane then went to the judge and told them everything, and it was enough to get her body exhumed. The new autopsy showed her neck had been broken, her windpipe crushed, and her ligaments were ruptured. Edward was arrested soon after, and it was the first time in history that a testimony from a ghost got a murderer convicted. We all need some more ghost testimonies, honestly. Coming in at number 9 is the Wizard Clip. Weird name, I know, but just go with it. Back in 1794, a man came to the Livingston family home in Middleway asking to lodge there. After being there a few days, the man got very ill, and as his sickness got worse and worse, he called Adam Livingston to his bedside table and told him he was Catholic. Feeling like he was about to die, he asked Adam if he could get a priest for his last rites, rights, but Adam was Lutheran and hated the church. He replied by saying a priest would never enter the doors of his house, and despite begging for a priest, the man died a few days later, and Adam didn't even know his name. Adam felt bad and employed Jacob Foster to sit up with the corpse, and Jacob lit candles in the room, but they went out straight away. He tried again and again, but they went out each time. Freaked out, Jacob left the house immediately, and I really don't blame him. Adam buried the man on his property, and things just went downhill after that. The family started hearing the sound of horses galloping outside their house, but there were no horses around. A while later, his barn burnt to the ground and half his livestock died and the other half just disappeared. Inside his home, kitchenware would get thrown around by an invisible force, coins would disappear, but the worst of all was the clipping sound. They could hear a clipping sound at night and would wake up to find half moons and other weird shapes cut into blankets, shoes, clothes, basically everything, and they dubbed that the wizard clip. This is what happens when you don't perform a man's last rites, people. He ruins your life. At number 8 we have John Henry. John is a proper folk hero. He worked as a steel driving man, which is basically someone who hammered a steel drill into rock in order to make holes into it, to put explosive into that, and then they just blow it up. According to the myth, John was the best man on the job. He was stronger than everyone, more committed, more persistent, he could literally beat anyone. But his true match came when he was up against a steam-powered rock drilling machine. He grabbed 2 hammers and started going at it. They had 35 minutes each, and his workmates were screaming and cheering for him like anything. By the end of it, he had managed to make 2 7-foot holes, whereas the drill had only made 1 9-foot hole, so man had clearly beat machine. John held his hammers up in victory as everyone went wild, but the cheering was so loud the men didn't realize that John was actually about to fall. He fell to the ground, and even though the men rushed to him, it was too late. A blood vessel had burst in his brain, and so that was the end of the greatest driller in the C&O Railroad history. Man won, but I guess machine also won as well. Filling our number 7 slot is the Huntington Hitchhiker. In Huntington on 5th Street Hill, you'll find a young girl late at night waiting for a ride at the top of the hill. It's not every day at night, don't you worry, only when the weather is especially dreary and rainy. Pathetic fallacy much. The first sighting of her was in 1942 when a cab driver picked up a girl wearing a blouse and skirt despite it being freezing outside. She asked to be dropped to the bottom of the hill, and when they got there, the woman was gone. The driver came back to his garage to complain about the incident to his boss when he found out that many other drivers had had the exact same experience. A newspaper article published in 1958 claimed a Huntington couple had brought their daughter and fiance to get married, but on the drive home the rain was insane and the car turned over and the girl died. So they say the hitchhiking girl is the same one who died in the car crash on her wedding day. Forever trying to get home and start her married life, honestly, who knows. Now at number 6 is the Weeping Woman. There's always a weeping woman or a woman in white on all of these lists. I actually expect it now, but either way, the Weeping Woman statue in Parkersburg isn't simply just a statue. Plot twist, who would have guessed? Located in Riverview Cemetery, it's said its role is to watch over the Jackson family, who were actually cousins to the Civil War general Stonewall Jackson. Visiting the statue is all well and good, just don't do it on nights where there's a full moon, because according to the myth, that's the time she comes to life. She's said to be a good judge of character, so if she thinks you're doing something you shouldn't be, she's been known to pull hair and rip t-shirts. I mean, she will come for you. Not the worst thing that could happen from a statue entity though, I mean, it could be worse. Women in West Virginia gravitate towards her because many people believe she can grant wishes and that she can make pregnancies more successful. So, a high moral, pregnancy-inducing protective spirit. Got it. Coming in at number 5 are the Giants. There are tons of ancient burial mounds all over West Virginia, and you'd be surprised at the number of giants found in them. The first was found in 1774 when Jack Parsons was walking near Cheat River and he saw some bones poking out of the ground. He pulled out what seemed to be a femur, and when he put it next to his own, he realized it was 7 inches bigger. After digging up the whole skeleton, he figured the person would have been at least 8 feet, bordering more. And many more giant skeletons have also been found in the area that locals now dub it Giant Town. Every single account of a skeleton being dug up put the deceased at over 8 feet. That is insane. How are there that many giants? I don't understand. Like, the tallest man in the world was 8'11" in the world, and you're telling me 8-foot people were just walking around chilling near Cheat River? Like, I'm only 5'4", this makes me sad. At number 4 are the mummies of Philippi. I never thought we'd get mummies on the list, but clearly there's a first time for everything. So back in 1888, a mummy-obsessed amateur scientist called Graham Hamrick was trying his level best to make and try his own embalming potion. He bought some bodies from the West Virginia Hospital for the Insane, which I didn't even know you could do. I didn't know you could just buy dead bodies so casually. Surely there should be like a longer process than that, but okay. Either way, before trying it on the bodies, he tried it on some fruits and vegetables and it worked great, so when he tried it on the bodies, he wasn't surprised when it worked perfectly for them too. The two cadavers actually lived long after he did and even toured with the Ringling Bros and Barnum and Bailey circus. When they were sent back to Philippi, they were forgotten in a barn somewhere, but now the Hamrick mummies are displayed at the Barber County Historical Society Museum. All's well that ends well, I guess. Filling our number 3 slot is Edith. Hospitals just aren't fun, let's be real, but at River Park Hospital in Huntington, the staff have managed to find fun in situations I would be bricks in. Employees believe the hospital is haunted by a ghost named Edith. Edith Miller was a registered nurse who started working at the hospital in 1923. And I honestly wish I could tell you she died in a really horrific way at the hospital and that's why she haunts it, but that's really not the case. She's literally just there monitoring the system, making sure everything is going smoothly. Employee of the month for life. Pretty much. At times she opens and closes elevator doors when she shouldn't and messes with the lights, but either way, Edith is still harmless. She's never hurt anyone, although people tend to feel cold spots when they're near her. Patients have also heard footsteps of someone walking down the hallway when there's no one there. Come on Edith, that's rookie ghost. You can do better than that. She's so integrated into the hospital that during orientation for new employees, they actually prepare you for your first encounter with her. Gotta love Edith, am I right? Now at number 2 is the Bower House, also known as Shady Dell, which you already know isn't a good look. But the Bower House was built by Captain John Bower and the house was given to his son JT, but when JT died he left no heirs for the house to go to. The house was empty for decades and is now being turned into a bed and breakfast. Whilst renovations were underway, workers would hear footsteps and whispers around the house, and standing near the family's portrait photos gave everyone a cold, uneasy feeling. Weirdly enough, they even found a pool of blood as well as a trail on one of the interior staircases, and despite him brushing it off and hoping it was rusty water, others thought it was a death omen. Which, I mean, rusty water, death omen, two very different things. The portrait of Aunt Lenora is said to follow you around the house, just looking at you wherever you go. But the biggest feature of the house is the Headless Horseman. A Union soldier called Julian Garish was beheaded during the Battle of Stones River, and his friend's military patch that Julian wore was found as part of the house's artifacts. Many people had seen the man wander the property, but after the patch was removed, Julian too just ceased to take his nightly walks. Or nightly floats. I feel like ghosts float, they don't walk. So his nightly floats. Yeah. And finally, at number 1 is Mothman. Now this creature has been seen around the Point Pleasant area of West Virginia. What happened was that in November of 1966, 5 men were digging a grave at a nearby cemetery when they saw a huge man-like figure fly from the trees above them. A few days later, 2 couples told police they also saw a massive grey creature whose eyes glowed blood red. They described it as a large flying man with 10-foot wings. In the upcoming weeks, the reports from people seeing the thing were coming in like crazy. A large bird with red eyes glowing like bicycle reflectors. No one could figure out what the hell it was that was terrorizing the town. Some thought it was connected to aliens or a supernatural manifestation of some sort. I mean, I don't really know. I mean, whatever it was still an unidentified flying object, so maybe it is a UFO after all. The alien people were right, I guess.